Hello and welcome to the BBC's Global News Podcast on YouTube. I'm Charlotte Gallagher. And today we're going to be speaking to the BBC's chief international correspondent, Lyse Doucet. Lyse, President Trump says he's sent Iran a 15-point plan for ending the war and that talks are ongoing. However, Iran says the US is negotiating with itself. So what's going on?
In a sense, they're both right. So President Trump talks about very strong talks. He talks about negotiations. Iran says no talks, no negotiations are taking place. And what we hear from Iranians and from others who are involved, as many countries are involved in this effort to try to de-escalate, bring an end to this war, is that there are not talks per se, but there's a lot of messaging, which is, of course, part of diplomacy. Some of the messages are going directly between Iran's foreign ministry in Tehran and Washington, but most of the messages are going indirectly through third parties. And this time there are some new mediators on the block: Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan. And Pakistan in particular has offered to host high-level talks as early as this weekend. So a lot more is happening, but the two sides are very wide apart, and both sides are still at war. And we see there are active efforts by President Trump's team to actually step up the war, deployment of more forces, which is why Iran has said initially its reaction was this is just a subterfuge for you to boost stocks, bring down oil prices, and under the guise of, we're talking, then basically prepare for a military escalation.
And inside Iran, what's going on with the power structure? Who is in charge? Who would the US be speaking to?
There's a lot we don't know, partly because there's almost a total internet clampdown, and also because with Israel having assassinated so many top leaders, top clerics, top commanders, and vowing to kill even more, a lot of the senior officials who would be involved in running the country have literally gone underground. What we know from the first days of the war is that there was a decentralization. Iran had planned for a war like this, a decentralization of the control and command so that those military officers at high levels are able to carry out their activities to defend Iran or to attack without having to refer to the center, because communications are very difficult now. In principle, according to, let's say, the organigram of Iran's power structure, the top person is Mojtaba Khamenei, who's the son of the Ayatollah who was assassinated in the first hours of the war. But he's not been seen in public or heard in public. He has issued a lot of statements, which, of course, has raised the question, are these statements by him or just written for him? We get conflicting accounts about how badly he's injured. But we do know that underneath him, there is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And even before this war, they were assuming an ever more important role. And even before this war began, in fact, as early as last year, the late Supreme Leader had assigned two people he wanted to have a greater role in running the country. One was Ali Larijani, the security chief who headed the Supreme National Security Council. He was assassinated. And that left Mohammad-Bagher Ghalibaf, who has played a role through the years at every level of the system. He headed the Air Force and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. He was the police chief. He was the mayor of Tehran. But he's regarded as a hardliner who's perhaps pragmatic, the kind of person that President Trump has casting about for, the kind of person he wants to be, to use his expression, the Delcy Rodriguez of Iran. In other words, the Iranian equivalent of the Venezuelan vice president who took over after President Trump's forces extracted the president, Nicolas Maduro, and she now is working with the administration. But those two, Iran and Venezuela, are fundamentally very, very different. But all the talk now is of possibly talks involving the US Vice President J.D. Vance and Mohammad-Bagher Ghalibaf.
Who is in charge of the Revolutionary Guards? Is it fragmented itself now?
President Trump talks about this. He goes, first these were the leaders and we killed them in the first days of the war when they killed not just Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who's the supreme leader. They killed all the top, the head of the army, the head of the IRGC, the head of 4 major security agencies, all in one fell swoop. And then since then, they've been assassinating more and more of the commanders. But what we have seen during these weeks of war is how much Iran has prepared for this. It has prepared the succession a few layers deep. So every time someone is removed, that person is replaced. Sometimes the name is not given immediately because they know as soon as they mention the name, the bullseye will be on them. What the main observation has been is that the deeper you go, the more you're left with mostly the hardliners. And those views are basically say that this whole campaign is backfiring because you're left with people who will be even more hardline in dealing with internal dissent and also with their relations with the wider world, including the region and the United States and Israel.
Will they want to sign anything with the US, or do you think they might want to continue fighting?
So there's one channel which still exists, the only channel really that we know has been used in the past and is now being used again, which is between the person who had been the lead negotiator, the Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, talking to Steve Witkoff, who's President Trump's envoy for everything, former property developer, his golf buddy. He had been leading the Iran negotiations, and of late, along with Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law. Iran no longer trusts this process because every time they have been engaged in rounds of negotiations last June, also in February, they were shattered by a US-backed Israeli attack. So they see it as a subterfuge. So they're making it clear they would like to talk to somebody different. And the Americans also say they want to talk to somebody different, which is why this new channel is being discussed. Now, it's very opaque. We don't know what's going on. But from sources, we understand that there are indirect messages going to Ghalibaf, who, again, is literally underground in Iran, sending messages about possible negotiations. And Ghalibaf is seen as someone who could possibly bridge the divides between the political and the security establishments. But right now, it doesn't seem as though there's enough common ground. Yeah. In fact, both sides in this war think they're winning. President Trump keeps saying, we've defeated Iran. There's nothing left. They need to surrender. And the Iranians think actually they're winning. They're winning by surviving, and they're winning by having weaponized that crucial waterway, the Strait of Hormuz. So neither is ready to give in. So it's not very propitious for any kind of really genuine and successful negotiating track.
And considering Donald Trump says he's a deal maker, and he really prides himself on that, do you think he knows how to make a deal with Iran?
President Trump has shown he doesn't really have the patience and the focus for anything which is long dragged out. He likes the short, sharp and successful, like what happened in Venezuela. One day, in and out, Nicolas Maduro is on trial and he's working with a new president in Venezuela. That's what he wants, which is why when the negotiations were still going on in February, I was discussing with people who were either part of this process or were observing the process and saying, what will Trump go for? Will he go for the deal which was widely believed to be in reach, which is a narrow nuclear deal, short, sharp, successful, which would allow President Trump to declare victory? I made a deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Or would he go for literally the deal of the half century to basically try to change everything in the Islamic Republic of Iran, to go for regime change? What happened was he did go for the big one. And then now he finds the general view is that he's losing control of it. Yeah. But all Iranian officials, they told it to us, they told it to all the media, they shouted from the rooftops that if they were attacked, they would attack the Gulf states, that they would regard American bases as legitimate targets, which then raised the question, who was President Trump relying on? He doesn't have a strong coterie of advisors who really, really know the Middle East and have long experience in the Middle East, because they've been pushed aside for those who are loyal to him and those he trusts. And it's really showing now.
That was the BBC's chief international correspondent, Lyse Doucet. And if you want to hear more from the Global News Podcast, click the link below. Thanks.